Warning: the radio broadcast you're about to hear was made by men and for men. It may at times seem a little rough around the edges, brash, and certainly not canonically approved by papal authority. But its content may indeed challenge you to become the man, father, husband God has called you to be. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to the latest edition of The Obligation. My name is Jason Murphy. So glad you are here. Have an exciting episode to cover this week. Desk covered in paper. The stack keeps getting thicker and thicker. Coming to you from the Carolina Catholic Media Studio on North Tryon Street, joined by our producer, Chris Pressler. How you doing out there, Chris?
Doing great. Glad to be here.
Yeah, man. Glad to be back here. Happy Easter to you.
Happy Easter to you.
Yeah, we've it's been an exciting couple weeks, Holy Week and through the Triduum and now Easter. We're going to be joined shortly by our good friend Jim De Piante. Jim and I have been discussing the traditional Latin Mass and the recent restrictions to the Triduum, the confirmations, the nuptials, and so many other things coming down from Rome. Jim is a follower of the traditional Latin Mass. He attends the Society of St. Pius X in Mount Holly. Jim, how are you doing today?
Doing fine, Jason. Glad to be here. Thank
Good.
you.
Glad to have you. My brain's just all over the place. We have so much to cover. We've talked about so many things. I guess start off with you. Happy Easter to you as well.
Happy Easter.
Yeah.
Happy Easter.
How are things down by the river?
Across the Catawba.
That's right.
Good actually. It's always there's always so much to do in terms of music and decorations and liturgy that it's pretty intense time. But now this is the calm after the storm, so things are placid.
How were your attendants down there? How were things in recent news with the restrictions here in Charlotte?
Well, not surprisingly, pretty good. We had a lot of fresh new faces.
Yeah.
It started, I would say. Well, I mean, it started a couple years back with COVID restrictions. We've been growing. Then Traditiones Custodes sent a new influx, and then we had a whole bunch of new visitors through the Triduum. Even devotions like Stations of the Cross had larger crowds than we've ever had throughout Lent. And then we had a day of recollection before Palm Sunday, and that was extremely well attended. And then Palm Sunday, we've never had a procession with so many people and so many new faces, all just lovely people. It was just delightful, and we fed a lot of folks.
Were you guys overflowing? Did you have it set up? Folks outside?
We did. We had we had folks downstairs with a television screen set up. So that was Palm Sunday. Holy Thursday, full beyond capacity. Again, we had people downstairs. Stations on Good Friday, full. That's never happened before. Past full. Yeah. And then the Friday afternoon liturgy was likewise packed full, and the vigil. It was beautiful. So many people. Actually, so many people, even given that we had two Masses on Easter Sunday. And those two Masses had attendance that's typical of a Sunday. But then at the vigil, we had we were full.
Wow.
And I'll say we have the best. We have the best.
Oh yeah,
Easter fires in Christendom. I'm sure of that.
Yes, I can imagine. I think I saw some pictures, and it is quite an inferno. It's beautiful. We did the Holy Thursday pilgrimage. Had about 20 guys.
Seven churches. Good.
Yeah. We were running tight. It's tough. It's tough getting them all in, but we got 7 churches in. And we were going to slide down by the river if time permitted. But like I said, even in vehicle, it's a 3-hour journey with spending not even 10 minutes at each church. So it's really beautiful. Several of the guys had never experienced it. We had a few young men join us, some sons of fathers, and it was beautiful. We had a seminarian with us, and it was really nice. One of my favorite nights of the year. Just a very solemn, beautiful night, and then with the full moon out, and it's always wonderful. Yeah, so we ended up staying in Charlotte for Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and then we headed down to the beach, and we spent Easter down at the beach. And so we're always, having to deal with the type of mass that we'll attend.
The vagaries
Yeah,
of what
yeah.
you're going to encounter.
Yeah. So we, we're very blessed here in Charlotte, so that at the cathedral, it's done, as good as it probably can, although it be not ad orientem and not in Latin. We are thankful for the way it is handled in a few of the churches here in Charlotte, and the diocese as a whole is doing a lot better than many other dioceses.
I'd say that's fair.
But going down there, it's the same kind of situation I spoke before. They're not really, interested in giving communion on the tongue to anyone. And I don't know if that's due to COVID restrictions still or fears thereof that are kind of lingering. But I was proud of my wife. I looked down the aisle, right, communion time, kind of like, doesn't look like...
What are we going to do?
What are we going to do? And she said she's going to go for it. So I was, so she went for it, and we were. I can't say 100% because I couldn't see behind me, but I would say of the 90 to 95% of the folks that I did see, none of them received on the tongue. So I'm pretty sure we probably one of the few, not to say
you were that family.
We were that family for
Good
Easter.
for you.
Yeah, we were that family. But that's okay. That's okay. That's testimony, and people, we get a lot of compliments going in. We have, the whole family's there, all 6 kids and mom and dad, and we get a lot of compliments on the behavior of the kids, and everyone's put together. We don't just waddle in our flip-flops and shorts and
in your beach wear.
And we're usually the only ones with kids. If you ever go down to the beach, there are no kids down at the beach. It's a lot of gray hairs, and hey, I can't say much because I'm starting to get a lot of gray hairs myself. But there's not a lot of kids, so I think everyone's excited to see the kids. And more than once, the priest came up to my wife when she was in the back and tried to let her know about the cry room, even though the child wasn't crying. He's like, "Oh, it's very comfortable. There's a TV in there, and there's speakers, and it's very comfortable." She's like, "Thank you, but I prefer to be in the church and be able to go back and sit down with my family." So yeah, they're not really used to having multiple kids. So anyway, so we were down there, had a good time, did some fishing with the boys, and started thinking. Just in regards to kind of our recent work here, and I talk about our recent work, just talking about, some of the topics and conversations we've had about the traditional Latin Mass, things that aren't really discussed very commonly, at least in the normal circles amongst Catholics, until recently, with the surge in the traditional Catholic Mass followers, especially in the Charlotte Diocese and many other dioceses throughout the country that are going through the same woes that we're going through now. So, thinking about that work, where I was out fishing with my kids, and I thought for many years, I went without fishing at all. And I'm an avid fisherman, I can tell you that. For the past few years, I am all about getting out there and catching the fish. And, it's great with the boys. It's, we have good fellowship. And it's just something that, they'll never forget. The type of fish that we catch, the number of fish, and I grew up...
Just the experience.
The experience, I grew up, my dad was a big fisherman. He was a Bassmaster fisherman, and I remember huddling under the boat, at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning and heading out. I remember all the smells and the signs and, looking out across the waterways and things. Remember the brake lights of everybody lined up at the ramp, at 4 o'clock in the morning thinking, what are all these people doing? It's still nighttime. But I started thinking, I'm like, well, why didn't I continue to fish? And as silly as this may sound, up in North Carolina, so I'd moved up to North Carolina, so my dad was in Louisiana, so of course I wasn't near the fishing as much, but I could certainly have fished around here. I got to thinking, why didn't I got to the point where I didn't like the smell of the fish, and I didn't like getting my hands dirty. And I know that sounds silly, and I apologize for my... For being such a
for the squeamishness,
for being such a wimp when it comes to that. But I thought about that. I'm like, I really didn't like getting my hands dirty, and I started thinking about that more. And I'm thinking, if I wouldn't have ever gotten back into that, all of these experiences and all of these times and all of this that my boys and my whole family really, being able to go out and experience this, they wouldn't be able to. They wouldn't have it. And
for a shabby reason.
Yeah, right. A ridiculous reason. And I can't imagine now not having that part of my life, because it's a very important part of my life. I mean, it's something certainly it's not going to take away from my practice of my faith, but it's an important aspect of my life. I really enjoy it. I think it's great with the boys. It's good father-son time and things like that. So I think I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about how, right now what we're going through here, because this is work. This takes time. This is work. And, we could just say, or I could just say, you know what? I don't like the smell of this work. I don't like the time it takes to kind of go through it. I don't like the critiques that we may or may not get from it. And so I wanted to kind of bring those two together and say, how many times in life we turn away from things because it seems like, it's just not something, we want to do anymore, or it's something we don't want to see that, or we don't want to smell that. And what are we missing by not doing that? So I think, and I hate to say it, but I feel like we may have gotten to a point where we just didn't want to look at this anymore. We didn't want to look at
it. Stinks.
Yeah,
it stinks.
And so we're just kind of going along to get along, as a whole. And I just think it needs to be said. I think it needs to be brought up, and that's why I'm doing it. And I think Catholics need to really look at what it is that they believe they're practicing, and that's a strong statement. But take a look, because if we go by what our leadership is presenting to us since the 1960s, you would think that that's all we had ever. And we have such a rich abundance of history and tradition that has been ignored until 2007.
Well, ignored is generous. It's been intentionally disregarded. It's been intentionally swept under the rug. It's been very intentionally put aside to our detriment.
And so I think it probably stirs up some emotions, feelings. Some of our listeners, I'm sure, are like, what are you guys talking about? Like, I have my church, I have my Mass, and now you've been talking about why there's issues with it. And I feel like, at some point, the rocks, the mountains will cry out. And I feel like at this point, we have to discuss these things. We have to look at where we are, why we are there, and what we're going to do about it. Because the numbers don't lie. We've talked about the numbers. We've talked about statistics. We talked about, belief and understanding of the tenets of the faith, participation in Mass, closure of churches, seminaries, vocations, down the line. So we've presented these things. I don't want to sit here and just beat a dead horse. But I do believe if enough people get involved and enough people gather around and listen and see what's going on, especially now. We talked about that in 1960s, everyone may not have agreed with it, but they kind of went along with it. Yeah. But now we're in a different place, because now we have hindsight. Now we have 2020. We can look back and we can say, okay, well, that is what we had. This is what we have. And here's the difference.
Yeah, hashtag it's not 1975 anymore.
Yeah, it's not. So we're going to get our hands dirty. And I told you,
Jason, I've been in the muck for 40 years.
Archbishop Lefebvre had his hands dirty a lot sooner than any of us. And I'm a little bit. I say late to the game, but I'm kind of like getting back into the game. Kind of like I'm getting back to my fishing. I'm getting back to the matters at hand, and the matters at hand are very important in regards to our faith and our Holy Catholic Church. So, that being said, I told you before we came on that I may have had sort of a tangent, sort of a sidebar that I want to throw out at you, and I'm gonna
standing by.
So here we go. All right. In 1985, Coca-Cola decided to revamp their formula. Do you remember that?
Oh, I do.
Coke Classic.
Coke Classic. Well, there was the new Coke, and that
right.
didn't fly.
Well, yeah, correct. The new Coke, not Coke Classic. So in 1985, new Coke came out, and this was an attempt to go after the Pepsi drinkers. Even though Coke was still selling more than Pepsi, they were declining. Do you remember how long it it stayed on the market?
I don't.
It stayed on the market less than 3 months. I think specifically 79 days. And I started reading through some of this history here. You know, one of these things just kind of jumps out, you know, and you start looking into it and you're like, man, there's some pertinence here. So Coke decided they would revamp it. Now, when it first came out, they were selling it in the same cans and in the same bottles. And
trying to pass it off as the same stuff, only better.
So they, they recognized that the younger drinkers at the time, they preferred Pepsi, and the boomers were moving towards diet products. So they thought, okay, well, we have to do something. So Roberto Goizueta, who became the Coca-Cola CEO in 1980, he told his employees that there would be no sacred cows in how the company did business, including how it formulated its drinks. So I thought that was interesting. So, okay, there's a little religious reference there, but there's a few others that I just think are interesting. So I'm going to go on and, Coca-Cola's senior executives commissioned a secret project headed by marketing vice president Sergio Zyman and Coca-Cola U.S. president Brian Dyson to create a new flavor for Coke. The project was called Project Kansas. Project Kansas. So you're not in Kansas anymore, Dorothy. Things are going to change real fast. So April 23rd, 1985, production of the original formula ended that week, and the new Coke was initially introduced as an old Coke packaging, like I said. All right. They described the new flavor as bolder, rounder, and this is my favorite, more harmonious. And I'm thinking, this is uncanny. There's just a lot. And uncanny, there's a pun there for you. Yeah, it's just the verbiage here. I'm like, okay, why is this popping in my head? The new Coke, and we've been talking about the new mass and how it's packaged and how it's presented. So it was more harmonious. So, looking further on, I continue to read, and he was questioned, so the executive, he was questioned about its success, and he replied, he said, "No, and I don't assume that this is a success. This is a success." And then what jumped right at me was the Titanic, the ship that couldn't be sunk even by God. And I'm like, wow, okay, we have really set ourselves up to fall here. So they basically presented when they first introduced it, they had introduced it back in 1986 to a bunch of workers that were renovating or remodeling the Statue of Liberty. So if you remember that, they had all the scaffolding up back then. And then, so they were just giving thousands and thousands of cans. They were getting great feedback because they were just giving it away. Now, what happened when they stopped giving it away? Well, people started to realize, like, hey,
this isn't right.
This isn't right. It's a little different. Now I got to pay for it. And if I'm going to pay for it, I have a choice, and that choice began to be proven that it was not something they were interested in. So then came the backlash. In a Chicago Tribune story about reaction in the South specifically, a professor at the University of Mississippi observed that changing Coca-Cola is an intrusion on tradition. All these puzzles or pieces are just like, wow, this is just, I'm like, I don't know why I started thinking about this. I'm like, then I started digging deeper, and I'm like, it just goes and goes. And, we get.
So why did they change their minds? I can't wait to hear.
Yeah, so we're getting to that. So basically, within the first week or so, the company received over 40,000 calls and letters expressing anger or disappointment. In one letter they delivered to Goizueta, it was addressed to the chief dodo at the Coca-Cola company. And another letter asked for his autograph as the signature of one of the dumbest executives in American business history. He would likely become valuable in the future. They even brought a psychiatrist on to field the calls. So a psychiatrist whom Coke had hired to listen in on calls told executives that some people sounded as if they were discussing the death of a family member.
This is a stinking beverage. We're not talking about.
Yeah,
we're not talking about.
This was a big deal. This was a big deal. A big deal and a big flop. So on the day that the new Coke was was let out. Chris, do you remember that big change?
Yeah, I remember that.
That was wild, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's freaking out. I think there was
Yeah.
anticipation. There was all sorts of anticipation on this. I remember
Yeah.
it. I mean, I was in
I
sixth
do.
grade at the time, but I remember it specifically. That was a big deal.
Yeah.
Have you tried it? Have you tried it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you like it? I like it. Do you like it? No, I don't like it. I mean, this was a big buzz.
Mhm.
All right. So on that day, April 23rd, 1985, PepsiCo gave its employees the day off by saying, "By today's action, Coke has admitted that is not the real thing." Right?
Stuck their finger right in Coca-Cola's eye.
They did. They did. And so after being issued, in 85, in May of 85, by July, on the afternoon of July 11th, 1985, Coca-Cola executives announced the return of the original formula only 79 days after New Coke's introduction. Now, this is serious, to your point. ABC News' Peter Jennings interrupted General Hospital. Okay, General Hospital, soap operas in the 1980s was a big deal.
Big deal.
All right? So they introduced it with a special bulletin to share the news with viewers. They called the reintroduction a meaningful moment in U.S. history. The company hotline received 31,600 calls in the 2 days after the announcement. So they continued to market it and sell the drink until 1992. And then they changed it to Coke 2. And then I think that ran until about 2002, and then they just discontinued it. So bottles and cans continued to bear the Coca-Cola Classic term until 2009, and then they subsequently have reversed it, and now it's just Coke. So in the late 1990s, Zyman summed up the new Coke experience thus: "Yes, it infuriated the public, it cost us a ton of money, and lasted only 77 days before we introduced Coca-Cola Classic. Still, New Coke was a success because it revitalized the brand and reattached the public to Coke."
Wow. Talk about trying to put the best possible face on something. Brilliant.
So I bring that up because it only took Coca-Cola 79 days to figure out there was a problem. Why is it taking us almost 50 years? We're coming up on a break, and we're going to have to take off. We will be right back with Jim De Piante. Stand by. This is Jason Murphy for the Catholic Men's Conference of the Carolinas and the Obligation Radio Show here on the Carolina Catholic Media Network. Catholic Radio is live and on the air at AM 1270, broadcasting from Belmont, North Carolina to the Charlotte regional area. Carolina Catholic produces more local content than most Catholic radio stations across our country. Tune in on air, online, on demand, and anytime at www.carolinacatholic.org. Make sure to catch the 2022 Catholic Men's Conference of the Carolinas replays each Saturday afternoon starting at 3 p.m. You can catch Keith Nestor, Tim Staples, Dr. Ray Garundi, our own Dr. John Aquaviva, and find out what the buzz is all about for the Catholic Men's Conference of the Carolinas. Also, make sure to tune in to the featured men's shows on Carolina Catholic: Faith and Sport with Dr. John Aquaviva, airing on Mondays at 5 p.m. and on demand; The Remnant with Stephen Thomas, Bill Snyder, and Ray Haywood, airing on Saturdays at 5, and my show, The Obligation, which airs at 5 p.m. on Fridays. Catch all of these shows and more at AM 1270, on air, online, and over the app at www.carolinacatholic.org. Once again, this has been Jason Murphy. God bless, and Esto Vir. And we are back. Welcome back to The Obligation. If you all went and grabbed a Coke, cold Coke out of the refrigerator, our new sponsor for the day, Coca-Cola. No.
Yeah, get yourself a refreshing Coke.
There you go. So, yeah, we were talking about the utter flop of Coke Classic. I keep saying Coke. Of the new Coke back in 1985. But Coke, decided after 79 days, they realized this was a big mistake. And just to wrap up this story, I looked up, some of the most famous failures in product failures and advertisements that did not sell. And actually, Jim, you're a big IBM guy.
I am 30 years retired.
And y'all made the list all the way down to number 3. Do you remember PC Junior?
Oh my goodness, yeah.
PC Junior. I guess they were trying to go in and undercut, some of the other competitors at the time. Let's see why it failed. This computer had a hefty price tag at $699. It was twice the price of the computers from Atari and Commodore. I had a Commodore 64 and Atari 2600, I guess. Many were also disappointed at the awkward layout of the factory shipped keyboards. I'm not sure. Chris, do you remember the PC Junior? You remember that little guy?
I think so, barely.
Yeah. So IBM was on there, number 3, and I'll mention the other just because we're on there. So number 1. Actually, I'll do number 2 because that's one of my favorite cars. I think everybody out there, from the Gen X, especially with Back to the Future. So DeLorean, John DeLorean, and it wasn't the product. It was actually the owner of the company who kind of ruined that one. Number 1 was the Ford Edsel. I wasn't familiar. That was 1958. So I'm not familiar with the Edsel, but they made the list.
That's almost the iconic product failure.
And Coke was on that list, was number 9. So number 9 on the all-time top 10, and here we are back in Charlotte, North Carolina. We are talking about the restrictions on the traditional Latin Mass, trying to really educate folks about the traditional Latin Mass and its beauty, something that otherwise, I would not be sitting here having this discussion. It changed my life. It brought me back to faith. I was thinking of things that stood out to me, when it comes to this the new Mass per se. Just experiencing it as a Catholic, as someone who's practicing, I feel there are 3 words really: lacking, distracting, and common. And those are not things I want to be saying about my faith. Those are 3 things that I want to remove completely from my practice and my knowledge of the faith, and I think it cries out. So I'm gonna let Jim jump in here and give me a little commentary on where we are, because I know he's rare and he's ready to go. He's been very patient, but I had to get that one out there. I had to lay it up. I teed it up for you. It's all yours.
I mean, it's an interesting choice of words: lacking, distracting, and common. Yeah, that's what has come of what passes for the Catholic faith. And when I contrast that with what I experience at St. Anthony's, it is, rather than lacking, it's utterly fulfilling. Rather than distracting, it's inherently attractive. And rather than commonplace, it's transcendent. There's a certain effect of the Latin language, a psychological effect of using an ancient language. So whether it be Greek, in ancient Greek, or Slavonian in the Eastern rites, or Latin in the Latin Church, it has the same effect as foreign languages in opera. So if you watch an opera in English, it's banality put to music, whereas the use of a language, and even a very sophisticated form of the language with beautiful lyric in a language that's not so common anymore, lends it a certain gravitas, which is exactly the opposite of this commonplace that you refer to.
Yeah.
Something crossed my mind when you were talking about the real thing. So we have the real thing, which was Coca-Cola, and then we have the real presence.
Yeah.
And we've lost sight of that as part and parcel of the Mass.
Absolutely.
Another thought that occurred to me as you were talking about how quickly they changed their minds is they knew what they were about, and nobody had an agenda that was different from what they were about. So they knew they were about making money selling beverages, and they thought, mistakenly, that they would make more money selling more beverages. But they never lost sight of the fact that their gig was selling beverages. Well, it turns out some knuckleheads in their ivory towers thought better than their customer base, And so they changed everything. One thing was eminently clear. It was immediately obvious. Their market, their consumers, the people, never asked for it. They did not ask for it to change. They did not want something different. They wanted Coca-Cola. And if Coca-Cola was losing share, it wasn't because the formula was wrong. And so they tried to imitate Protestants. I mean, Pepsi-Cola.
Well, exactly. That was an analogy I made earlier today too. Exactly. Well, what do you call Pepsi? If Coke's the true faith, what's Pepsi? What's Protestant?
What's Protestant? Sure. So the people didn't ask for it. The people didn't want it. They got it, notwithstanding. But there's a big difference between what happened with Coca-Cola and what has happened in the church with the new Mass. No one at Coca-Cola had a nefarious agenda. And the idea that somehow there were not people in the church, and still people in the church, who have the agenda to undermine orthodoxy,
Absolutely.
who have the agenda to undermine the faith, who have sought to bring destruction to the faith, and are succeeding. There was nobody like that at Coca-Cola. Everybody there understood the game. They understood what they were about. They understood they made a mistake, and there was nobody saying, "Oh no, we just haven't implemented New Coke properly. If we implement New Coke properly, everything will be fine. So let's have at it for 50 years and lose 2 generations of Coca-Cola drinkers," which is what has happened.
Absolutely.
So if we look at market share, what has happened to the market share of the Catholic Church? I mean, that's a crass way to talk about it. But what has happened, as you mentioned, it's lost in every metric, in every conceivable way to measure the strength of the Catholic faith. In terms of just the numbers of the nuns left the convents, the priests left the rectories, the monks left the monasteries, the faithful walked out of their churches, and in record numbers. And the only thing that has caused the slightest uptick in all of that is when here and there somebody said, "Why don't we make Coca-Cola Classic available to a few people within certain constraints?" Call that the traditional Latin Mass. And where we see that implemented, we see growth. We see young people. We see families. We see people whose orthodoxy is unquestioned.
Yeah, and speaking of questioning, there was another thought I had. When I was younger, probably late teens, early 20s, I had a bumper sticker on my car, and I'm not one who advocates bumper stickers. I make fun of most of them. But at that point in my life, I did have a bumper sticker, and my bumper sticker said, "Question authority." Now, I was a very different young man back then, but I still am the same man. My attitude back then was probably one of a little more rebellion.
Rebellious, right.
A little.
Now it's maybe one of wisdom.
Well, working on that. Maybe one of a little kind of fringe mentality, outside of the herd mentality. Just kind of. But I guess that boils down to rebellion. So I was talking with Joanne the other day about that, and I think that. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that would say you shouldn't question authority. You just they're in their place, and they're God has ordained where they are, and I'm speaking in the church hierarchy, and we need to just kind of go along, and we need to pray, and we need to hope for the best and trust in the structure of the church. And many would say that you would be imprudent, to question that. And I don't, well, how would I feel if my son, had a question authority sticker on his laptop or on his backpack? Probably not something. I guess I'd have to know about it, because there's some extremes there. You can have a far extreme of questioning authority. That far extreme, one side could be anarchy, and like I said, rebellion. And then there's the other side, which is just the kind of, nope, I trust everything that comes down, and I'm just going to say my prayers and hope everything's good. And that's, of course...
There's a middle ground.
Yeah.
There's a middle ground where, as St. Paul said, we look at all things and sift them and retain what is good. It's certainly not a Catholic sentiment to blindly accept authority.
And there's certainly it's not as if you're a conspiracy theorist sitting around with some random conspiracy or very unfamiliar conspiracy of something going on, and you can't quite put your finger on it, but it's true. And we have generations of truth and fact showing and proving, and statistics of what's going on. This science is now there. That's not something we've wanted to hear, over the past 2 years. That's a statement. I think it's been, we're tired of hearing about the science because there was no science in a lot of respects in what's been going on in the last 2 years. I'm speaking of the pandemic. But in regards to the church, there is a science to what has been going on. And there are facts. And there is a time that we need to kind of figure out what's going on. I mean, I know our bishop here with the restrictions going on. He is doing his best as bishop, which is a very difficult position. He's a man I pray for and I respect, but I think it's unclear, for us to kind of stand by here. We really haven't heard anything definitive from the bishop other than there's a restriction. So I guess that would be one thing I'd be kind of interested to see, where does this come from? What are I may be going down a rabbit hole here. I mean, what
I don't know. It's hard not to be critical of the bishop. There have been bishops who simply refused, and they became persecuted as a consequence. I mean, down in Campos in Brazil, Bishop Castro de Meyer, the Archbishop himself, Archbishop Lefebvre, they were persecuted. There are other bishops who have been persecuted who stood athwart all of this.
We have a recent Bishop Fernandez Torres, from Puerto Rico.
Right. Dismissed, relieved. Relieved was the term that was used in the original Italian. Relieved of his job. He was asked to resign, and he said, "No, I'm not going to resign. I'm the bishop here, and I'm doing what I must." And he was relieved of his responsibilities without canonical process, which is totally morally reprehensible. But what the heck? I mean, if you're associated with the Society of St. Pius X, you're used to that, so he should call.
And he was just a bishop within the church, doing what he was supposed to do.
Doing what he was supposed to do. One of 7 bishops in Puerto Rico, and refused to align himself with their conference of Puerto Rican bishops. When they asked him to sign something mandating vaccines, he said, "No, I don't think so." They asked him to.
They want to send his seminary.
He refused to send his seminarians to the interdiocesan seminary where he felt they were being corrupted.
Absolutely.
He voiced opposition to a bill within the government of Puerto Rico that would have made illegal any attempt to convert homosexuals, and he opposed that as he ought to have. Mm-hmm. Well, the other 6 bishops said that they wanted him to join in collegially in condemning or supporting these things, and he said, "No, count me out." He was right to do that, but that wasn't the death knell. The death knell apparently is when they wanted him to join in condemning the use of the traditional Latin Mass and to support the restrictions of Traditionis Custodes. He said, "No, I don't think so." And he was immediately asked to resign, and he said, "No, I don't think so." And then he was relieved without canonical process. This is absolutely wrong. And when we look back on this, when history evaluates this, they're going to say this is yet another travesty to come out of Rome.
And yet we have bishops blatantly going against church teaching,
right?
Especially in Germany.
Oh my goodness!
That are have not had to.
Haven't been called to task for it.
Yeah. So no canonical process there either.
Right. where there needs to be.
Where there should be. We'll go ahead and take another quick break and be right back on The Obligation.
Did you know that 90% of older adults wish to stay in their home as they age? Aging in place has many benefits. It tends to improve quality of life, which in return improves physical health. Also, retaining independence as we age is critically important to our mental health. Hi, my name is Meredith Stignan, and I am the president of Harmony Home Solutions and an active parishioner of St. Patrick Cathedral. We are your trusted partner for aging in place. We strive to enhance the lives of older adults and their families by providing premier aging in place and universal design lifestyle solutions that increase safety beautifully. Now is the time to get your aging in place plan in order with Harmony Home Solutions. Visit our website today at hhsclt.com. Again, that's hhsclt.com. Or give us a call at 980-220-8821. Again, that's 980-220-8821. We want to help you live an empowered and beautiful life.
And you're back listening to The Obligation. Sitting here with my good friend Jim De Piante, Chris Pressler in the studio, and we were, going through and talking about, the Latin Mass restrictions, talking to the, some of the disobedience, maybe, issues with authority. We're just laymen. I'm going to trump everything by saying I'm just an ignorant layman. I'm doing the best I can out here. I've got 6 kids. I'm a sinner, and I'm trying to do the best to save my soul and those of my kids and my wife and as many others around me as I can. So I'm just gonna preface everything I've said, with that statement. And that being said, there's gonna be people out there, and I know, and there's probably some out there already have listened and are listening that would say that for us to discuss anything other than the standard operation, of the Catholic Church, and the new order, the new rite of the Mass, and to question any of that would be imprudent, and it would be disobedient. It would be questioning authority, but we have to take a look at it. If we're questioning the authority with facts and right reasoning and judgment, with a willingness to be right as well as wrong.
To be wrong, right? Absolutely.
In a true spirit of charity, which I believe and I know that is where we're coming from, because you, I'm sure, just like me, you're out there, I'm not going to call you an ignorant layman because I'm far more ignorant, but, and Chris, you're not an ignorant layman either. That's just for me, yours truly. But we are just simple guys. We are simple men trying to figure it out. And when things don't look right and smell right, when they don't add up, yep, we kind of want to know why. There's a quote, and I think it's attributed to St. Thomas Aquinas, and I heard it the other day, and I thought it was pretty fascinating. And it's simple, and it goes, "Rarely affirm, seldom deny, always distinguish." And I think that's important. Jim, what are your thoughts? Have you heard that quote before?
I have done, and I take it to mean, if I could use the vernacular and considerably less sophisticated language than he's used, it's don't be a hardhead. Don't disagree to just disagree. Don't agree just to go along, but make distinctions. Look at the distinctions that are important and make your judgments based on important distinctions rather than polemics.
Right, and there's a lot of polemics. There's a lot of catchphrases, a lot of just blanket statements that have been said. Especially, we're talking about the Society of St. Pius X. That goes way back. We're distinguishing. That is what we're doing. We have set them both up, and we've compared and contrast. And beyond a reasonable doubt is all that's required in a courthouse. And we're not in court, but the facts are pretty staggering. The science is there, like I said before. To those out there that say, okay, well, as soon as you hear Society of St. Pius X or SSPX or even, the traditional Latin Mass, that's not permitted, or it's irregular, or you're excommunicated, schismatic. Answers to some of those out there, Jim. Where does this society lie within the church?
Well, you hear all the pejoratives, you hear all of the terms. By the way, a lot of these terms carry with them some very serious implications: heresy, apostate, schismatic. To accuse an individual of these things is a very serious charge. It's not one that should ever be made lightly, and it's not one that should ever be made in ignorance. But sensible people have answered these charges. Unfortunately, other people continue to make these charges very ignorant of what they mean. So we can start... You keep using that word.
Yeah, exactly.
I do not think it means what you think it means.
One of my favorite movies.
So,
The
schismatic,
Princess Bride,
right?
yeah,
So, schismatic, what does it mean? It's kind of funny. People say, well, yeah, you go to St. Pius X. Aren't they schismatic? And I say...
I heard that from a bishop of the Diocese of Charlotte who's
I-
previously passed on, has said that to me one time.
Yeah, that's grave. That's grave. It's a calumny. And so it's not just incorrect. I mean, if it were true, it would still be incorrect to say that kind of thing. But it's a calumny. It's absolutely not true. So what does schismatic mean? Well, it's a very specific term, and it means that you reject the authority of legitimate authority within the church. So that could be your pastor or his associate. That could be your bishop, or that could be the Pope. If you reject their authority, then that puts you in a position of schism. The next thing that could make you schismatic is to reject the teachings that come from legitimate authority within the church. And so if you reject neither of those, then you're not schismatic. So no one who matters, other than people whispering or ignorant people saying things they shouldn't, or bishops who ought to know better, has ever accused the society of being in schism. And it's easy to understand why, because the Society of St. Pius X accepts every authentic teaching of the Holy Roman Church without exception. Without exception. So in terms of creed, they're not schismatic.
By accepting authority of someone in the church hierarchy, are you saying just by disobeying them, or rejecting that they hold that actual position?
So schism is rejecting that they have authority over you.
Okay.
And so, the church is very clear on this. Disobedience is not schism.
Right.
Okay. So, perfect example, a father of a family, and the son takes the family car against his father's wishes and goes out joyriding, gets intoxicated, crashes the car. His dad is still his dad. He recognizes that his dad is still his dad. He accepts his dad's authority. He knows he's wrong, but he has disobeyed his dad. On the other hand, if his dad instructs him to do something that's illegal, and he disregards his father's command, which is not a just law, he accepts that his father has authority over him, rejects that his father has the authority to ask him to do something that's contrary to right reason and morals. And so without rejecting his authority, he disregards an unlawful decree. Neither of these things is schism.
Right.
So schism is to reject either the authority per se of the Holy Roman Church or the teachings, the authentic teachings of the magisterium of the Holy Roman Church. If you don't reject either of those two things, you're not schismatic. Case closed. And no one who matters has ever accused the Society of St. Pius X of being in schism. It's just things people say.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a big one. Excommunicated. Oh, you're just a bunch of excommunicated Catholics.
Well, all right. This takes some clarification as well. So, of all of the faithful who avail themselves of the sacraments through the Society of St. Pius X, 6 were excommunicated. The famous Hawaii 6. All right. They were excommunicated by their bishop. They appealed to Rome, following the canonical process, and the then Pope Benedict said, "No, come on, this is silly." And he castigated the bishop and said, "No, they're not excommunicated." The bishop tried to press the point, and Rome came back and said, "No, really, let up. They're not excommunicated. You have no basis to excommunicate them." So the excommunication was determined to be illicit and lifted. So that's among the faithful. None of the priests of the Society of St. Pius X has ever been excommunicated. 6 bishops were excommunicated, Castor de Meyer, Archbishop Lefebvre, and the 4 bishops consecrated in 1988. They were declared to have excommunicated themselves. So there are 2 styles of excommunication. There's ferende sententiae, which means by canonical process, and then there's late sententiae, which means by virtue of having done something. They were accused of having, by virtue of having consecrated bishops without a papal mandate, they were declared to have excommunicated themselves ipso facto by virtue of that fact, late sententiae. Okay? Now, to have an excommunication lifted, it's very clear what needs to be done. You need to first acknowledge wrongdoing. Second, repent. Third, recant. And fourth, atone for your error. Then the excommunication can be lifted. The excommunication was lifted with none of that done by any of the excommunicated bishops in the Society of St. Pius X. Okay? They recanted nothing. There was nothing to recant. They atoned for nothing. There was nothing to atone for. They acknowledged no wrongdoing because there was no wrongdoing according to canon law. So the excommunications were lifted without any of this being exacted from the Society of St. Pius X bishops. And the reason for that is because they were determined to be invalid, illicit excommunications. So, excommunicated, the faithful never, except for the famous Hawaii 6.
What about Archbishop Lefebvre being excommunicated?
He died excommunicate, but excommunication is an affair only of the church militant. So when you die, there is no longer an excommunication. He died, as did Castor de Meyer, before the excommunications were lifted, and so they weren't lifted for them explicitly because they were no longer in place explicitly. Gotcha. So Archbishop Lefebvre is not excommunicated now, nor is Castor de Meyer. The 3 bishops who remain with the society are not excommunicate, and the 1 bishop who left the society, those are his affairs, and the society has nothing to say about it.
So if Archbishop Lefebvre would have remained living, it would have been lifted?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's no question. Absolutely.
And what year was that? Do you remember?
Oh, goodness. It was under Benedict, and it seems to me it was around, gosh, I don't remember.
So it's interesting, so many things changed with Pope Benedict. The lifting of the excommunications, the attempts to regularize the society, the revision of the missal,
There's actually a funny story around that. So people say their situation is canonically irregular, but canonically irregular does not have a canonical definition. It's utterly a meaningless term, right? But it's like the society acknowledges that their standing is not well understood by Rome, certainly. But under Benedict, there was a problem that the bishop who left the society was having with the German government. And the German bishops were all in a bother over it. And the society was planning to do ordinations within Germany. And the bishops went to the Holy See and said, "We're having a problem with this." And the Holy See went to Bishop Fillet, who was the superior general, and said, "Excellency, look, we have a problem. Can you help us out?" And he said, "What can I do for you?" He said, "We would really rather that you not stick your finger in the eye of the German bishops. So can you just, for these ordinations, can you please take them out of the jurisdiction of the German bishops?" And Bishop Fillet said, "Of course," because he's the son of the church. Yeah. In exchange for which, Rome granted recognition to the Society of St. Pius X for 2 weeks. How do you do that? I mean, that's silly.
Yeah,
True
yeah.
story. Not only, subsequently, and this is unprecedented, the Society of St. Pius X has the authority to consecrate, to ordain priests in every single diocese in the world directly from Rome, and does not need to obtain the permission of the local ordinary.
Interesting.
What does that mean about their canonical status? And how do you understand that?
Well, if you're not schismatic, you're not excommunicated, you're not irregular, you must be sedevacantes. Right? So
What do you do with that? I mean,
let's answer that, because I think that's a question that comes up. Because they go down the litany. Because I think many priests, many bishops go down the litany as well.
okay.
So,
Officially, the Society of St. Pius X does not hold the position of the sedevacantis. Not strictly speaking, sedevacantism is just a truth of the Catholic faith, and that truth is very simple. You cannot hold an office in the Catholic Church, any office, the bell ringer at the monastery, a pastor, a bishop, the pope. You cannot hold an office if you're not Catholic, but that only makes sense.
right.
The difficulty comes in if you're excommunicated or found to be in heresy or found genuinely to be schismatic, then you're stripped of your office and all benefices associated with that. What happens if you fall into error, but the canonical process doesn't play out? And the Church has really never declared. So do you lose your office automatically, or do you have to go through the process of being legally determined to be schismatic or heretical, or otherwise outside of the Church? It becomes particularly interesting in the case of the Pope, because no one stands in canonical judgment of the Pope. No one has legal authority over the Pope. So some theologians have asserted that a Pope who fell into error would lose his office automatically. Others say probably not. It's never actually been decided. So we don't know. The folks we call sedevacantists have made that judgment for themselves. But to say that they themselves are heretical is actually not correct. And to say that they deny papal authority is also not correct. They just hold that the incumbent, the guy who claims to be the Pope, isn't,
Gotcha.
but they don't reject the authority of the Pope per se. But I will say unequivocally, the Society of St. Pius X does not hold to that theory. They accept as valid popes all the popes that the sedevacantists question, from Pius XII, John XXIII, Paul VI, John Paul I, John Paul II.
He's prayed for in every Mass.
In every
and
Mass.
in every sacristy, there's a picture of the local bishop
There's the local bishop.
and the Holy Father. And sedevacantis, of course, in Latin, the seat is vacant, I guess,
Sede vacante, right? The seat is empty. Yeah.
meaning the chair of St. Peter. So, of course,
Right.
Society of St. Pius X, not sedevacante. So where does that leave? Where does that leave the society as it fits in the Diocese of Charlotte? Let's just talk about the Diocese of Charlotte.
That's home.
That's where we are. That's what we're dealing with. A lot of people, are heading that way. They're going to be heading that way. That's another.
It's happening.
It's another one of our scientific facts. It's just happening. And so where does that put? Where does that put them? What's the end game? Where does it all? How's that going to work?
So for a Catholic in the Diocese of Charlotte right now, the question is, can I go there? Should I go there? And the answer is you should, in my opinion. But can you? Morally? Absolutely. To be very, very clear. Of course, anybody can baptize, but Rome has never denied that their masses and their priests are valid. They are valid. Their sacraments are valid. Confession requires the permission of the local bishop for it to be valid, but the society has been given blanket permission throughout the world to hear confessions and forgive sins by the Pope without the permission of the local bishop. So there's no question. Confession, penance is valid. The masses are valid. Extreme unction is valid. Baptisms are anybody can baptize. Marriages, the Pope has said that diocesan bishops must either send a delegate or give delegation to the priest, the society priest who officiates and witnesses the wedding. That now makes society marriages absolutely unquestionably licit and therefore valid. So, 7 sacraments, permission to ordain in every diocese in the world, confirm also. 7 valid sacraments, the faith whole and entire, not watered down with any kind of silliness, absolute faith in the principle, all of the teachings of the Catholic Church, not schismatic, not disobedient. There's no reason not to go there, except that people in authority say you shouldn't go there, but they cannot give you a reason why not to. And by the way, if there's anybody in this diocese who would like to explain to Jim De Piante why I shouldn't be going there, then let's sit down and talk.
Yeah, invitation's open. We got an extra chair over here. We'd love to have any priest that is out there may hear this show and has offered the traditional Latin Mass, and like to join the discussion, or even just a diocesan priest who offers the Novus Ordo and maybe has questions, concerns, or argument to anything we've said. I would extend that even further to our bishop, to Bishop Jugas. We'd love to hear, especially with the great respect and reverence we offer to him, just as our shepherd, to give us a little guidance on where the church, where the church's opinion is of this and where they stand. So there's a lot of Catholics, curious and wondering, and the sheep are astray. And thankfully, the sheep are they're straying to a good place. They're not falling off cliffs. The sheep could be straying to other religions, other faiths, but they're straying to the truth. They're straying to tradition, and we have no greater way to know our future than by examining our past and following tradition. So we've covered a lot of ground once again. I really appreciate you coming back on. Chris, thanks for taking care of things behind the scenes today. And we will certainly be following up on this conversation. And certainly let us know if you're out there and you have questions, want to join the conversation, send us an email. You can send that to feedback@theobligationshow.com. Jim, I hope you'll be back with me soon. We have a ton more to cover.
Happy to come back.
All right, well, I appreciate it, and we'll talk to you all soon, and have a great week. God bless.
God bless you.
If you enjoyed this episode and have any questions or comments, or would like to come on the show and discuss your faith walk or any issue regarding the Catholic Church, send us an email at feedback@theobligationshow.com. You can also catch all of our previous episodes and all of the shows of Carolina Catholic Media at www.carolinacatolic.org. Click that donate button, and we'd greatly appreciate it. There are also many opportunities to sponsor the show, the radio station, and the Catholic Men's Conference. Join Sensus Fidelium, Harmony Home Solutions, and Wallach Investments, who have pledged their funds to help keep Catholic radio on the air and relevant. Sensus Fidelium is a collection of Catholic homilies, apologetic videos, and other resources to grow in one true faith. They can be found online at www.sensusfidelium.com. Wallach Investment, LLC is a strategic moral investing firm committed to placing their clients' interests ahead of their own. Their mission is to be a force of good in their relationships to make the most of their clients' investment, giving them the time and confidence to pursue their mission. Contact Daniel Wallach at www.wallachinvestments.com for more information. For the Obligation Radio Show, the Catholic Men's Conference of the Carolinas, and the Carolina Media Network, my name is Jason Murphy. God bless, and Esto Viva.